Hey there, this is Jess from MakingDoCrew.com, and in this video we're going to learn how to take a basic pair of cheap flip-flops and turn them into crocheted moccasins. These moccasins are great slippers because they're super lightweight and comfortable, but you can also wear them as shoes as long as you're not doing anything crazy in them, like running up a mountain or something. And if you see in the description box, there's a link to the blog post for this pattern, which will just give you essentially the same details, but if you're the kind of person who likes to also have a written pattern to reference, that would be really helpful for you here. So to make your crocheted moccasins, here's the supplies we're going to need. First, you want a pair of cheap flip-flops, and I recommend sizing down if you're sort of in between sizes. Choose the smaller size. The yarn we're using is Lion brand 24/7 cotton, and this is called a worsted weight yarn, but I find it to be slightly thinner than most average worsted weights. You're also going to need something sharp to poke holes in your flip-flop sole. So this is a tool that's meant for using on clay, and the hooks that you're going to need, you'll need two. The first one is going to be to put the yarn on the sole, and for that we need a slightly smaller hook. So this is a 2.5 millimeter, and that's about a B. And you're also going to need a 3.5 millimeter, which is an E, and that's what we're going to crochet the body of the moccasin in. You're also going to need a pair of sharp scissors and a tapestry needle to sew things together. And for the laces, you're going to want a little more than 2 yards of leather or faux leather laces. And if you want to add the seed bead detailing on the toe, you just need some seed beads in various colors, as well as, I used fishing line, but you could just use any strong thread, and a needle that will fit through the hole in the bead. And then lastly, if you want to put the parts of the strap that were once in the sole back into the sole to make the moccasin a little bit more shoe-like, you're just going to need some really strong glue. I'm using E6000. Okay, so the first order of business is just to trim off the straps. And like I said, if you want to put these pieces back in when you're finished, then just save them for later. Okay, so now we just have the basic rubber sole, and I'm going to take my clay tool and start at the heel to poke the holes. Now, with these holes, we want them fairly close together. As you'll notice on this moccasin that's already been crocheted, they're about a 1/4 inch apart. And if you think about it, the closer the holes are together, the more stitches we'll have on the essentially beginning row here. So if you're finding that you're ending up with way too many stitches, you probably have your holes a little bit too close together. If your shoe is curving like this, and the toe part is pulling in quite a bit, that is probably means that you don't have enough holes because you have too few of stitches. So for example, this flip-flop is a size 8-9, and I have 89 holes poked here. So I'm going to poke 89 holes in this one, and to do that, I'm going to start in the back, and I'm just going to poke from about the middle of the sole to about a 1/4 inch into the foot of the sole. And I'm just going to go around doing that about every 1/4 inch. Now, I've had a lot of readers with my other flip-flop patterns ask if the yarn will maybe tear through the flip-flop sole, and to be honest, we just haven't had any trouble with that. I think I've found it pretty impressive how long wearing these slippers or shoes can be, especially if you find a flip-flop that just has a pretty durable rubber sole. So as you can see, there's a little bit of a visible hole on the top, and I'm just poking every 1/4 inch all around, and I'm going to continue that all around this sole. Now that I have holes poked all the way around, I'm going to attach my yarn to the sole using my smaller hook. So to do that, I'm going to insert my hook in the back of the heel. So if there's a stitch, or if there's a hole you can see that's right about in the center, I would start with that one. And I'm going to insert my hook through the bottom, and we're just going to work carefully. These holes shouldn't rip, provided that they're right in the middle of the sole and that you just sort of go slowly and you're using a small enough hook. So I'm going to grab the yarn and pull it through, leaving a big enough loop that I can chain one through it. And then I'm just going to tighten that a little bit just so it's snug against this part of the flip-flop. And then I'm going to insert my hook in the next stitch. So I'm working right to left because I'm right-handed, just like I would in normal crochet. And I'm pulling the yarn through and then completing a single crochet. So we're looking at these holes almost like they are an existing row of single crochet, and each one of these holes is an opportunity for a stitch, just like a row of single crochet would be. So I'm going to insert my hook in the next hole, grab the yarn, pull it through, and then finish off that single crochet. Now this part of the process is slightly tedious just because you have to go so slowly and you're kind of wrestling the flip-flop when you might not be used to crocheting with rubber. But luckily you just have to make it around and then you can start crocheting with just yarn, and that's a little bit easier. I will continue like this, single crocheting around the entire sole until I get back to the place that I started in the heel. Okay, now that I've worked all the way around the sole, I'm coming upon my last single crochet. So I'm going to do that just as usual, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the first single crochet stitch I did. So I'm joining that round right there, and I could put a stitch marker right here so I know where the round begins, but we actually have this handy little tail left over from where we attached the yarn. So I'm just going to use that as my marker of where the round begins. And from here on, we're going to be working in a spiral, which means when we connect to the round, we're just going to continue to crochet. We're not going to join and then chain one. We're just going to keep going single crochet around and around. This is the first row that was worked in the flip-flop, and then we're going to do 2 more rows, and I'm going to work those with my larger hook now. This is the 3.5 millimeter. So starting in the same stitch that I joined with the slip stitch, I'm going to single crochet, and then I'm just going to work around the flip-flop in regular old single crochets. And this part definitely can feel a little bit awkward, especially at first when you're so close to the flip-flop with your crocheting. But the further up you get in height, the easier it gets, because then you're holding on to actually crocheted fabric instead of the flip-flop edge. So I'm going to work 2 more rounds like this, and I will meet you back here. Alright, so now I've worked 3 rounds total, 1 being in the sole and then 2 more rounds in single crochet. So I'm going to work again in single crochet, and I'm going to just work this 4th round until about the front nearest side of the toe to me. So now that I've made it to near the front of the toe, I've gone from the back here around up here toward the front. I'm going to put an extra single crochet in this stitch. So you can sort of just eyeball. It's around about maybe where your pinky toe would be. And I'm just going to put 2 single crochets in this next stitch. So I'm going to work 1 and then 2. So we're increasing in this row by 1 stitch right there, and then we're just going to work around to the equivalent point on the other side, sort of where your thumb toe, your big toe would be, and we're going to add another stitch right there too. Right about there looks good. I put 1 in that stitch, so I'm going to add a second single crochet just in the same hole, and then I'm going to continue around to the back. And the reason why we added those 2 stitches here is simply because the moccasin tends to slant in and kind of curve backward, just because of how many stitches there are on the bottom. And I know everyone might have a slightly different number of stitches based on how big your moccasin is, but generally speaking, in order to make these holes far enough apart that they won't tear through the rubber, you probably will need to increase a couple stitches here just to give this a little bit more space so it comes upright instead of curving back so much over your toe. So again, this isn't an exact science, so if you look at your toe and say, wow, it's really going backward this way, you might want to add, say, 3 stitches and sort of space them evenly out around the toe. Or if you feel like you're going straight up and down to begin with, you don't necessarily have to increase at all. You can kind of eyeball it, and that is the beauty and the challenge of crocheting on flip-flops, is that there's just no exact one right way to do it. So from here, this is the 4th round right here that we're doing, and we're gonna continue in single crochet for a total of 8 rounds, starting from this first round that's in the flip-flop, 7 more on top of that. And then we'll stop in the back where our stitch marker string is. So we have, after we finish this round, we have 4 more rounds. Okay, so now I've worked a total of 8 rounds in single crochet, and I'm stopping right here at the back where I started. So the next step is to put a stitch marker on either side about 3/5 of the way back toward the heel. So this would be about half, so it's a little bit further back than half. And that sounds like a weird fraction, but what we're trying to do here is we're gonna sort of build up this back heel section so that it doesn't fall off the back of your foot. So we're just gonna work some short rows to make this part taller, and then work on this part that folds over to hold the laces. We're gonna just continue working in the same direction we've been working, and we're gonna work to over here toward the stitch marker. So we're gonna single crochet until 1 stitch before the stitch marker. So now in the last stitch before the stitch marker, I'm gonna just slip stitch. So that's like kind of a lazy single crochet. I'm just gonna pull the yarn through like that. And now for the first time, I'm going to actually turn this around. To begin round 10, now working back in the other direction, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to skip the first stitch. So the first stitch is where we did the slip stitch, but I'm just going to skip that entirely, and then I'm going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And then I'm going to continue in single crochet until we get to 1 stitch before the stitch marker on the other side. So I'm going to work all the way around, back around this heel to over here. So now I've made it to the last stitch before the stitch marker right here, and just like I did on the other side, I'm going to slip stitch into that, and then I'm going to turn my work around, and again, like I did on the other side, I'm going to chain 1, and then I'm going to skip the first stitch, which is the slip stitch, and single crochet into the next stitch. And now we're going to work back around to the other stitch marker. So we've made it almost back all the way around for row 11 here, but instead of working all the way to the marked stitch like we did last row, we're going to stop a little bit shorter and actually stop before the first single crochet that we see from the last row. So I'm going to single crochet here, single crochet here, and then I'm going to leave that first single crochet I see unworked. And now I'm going to turn the work. For row 12, I'm going to chain, just like we've been doing, and skip the first stitch that I see. So not the chain, but the first stitch. We're not going to do anything there. And we're going to slip stitch into the next stitch. And then single crochet around to the other side. Alright, we've made it back around, and just like we did over here, we're going to find the first single crochet of the last row. So that's right here. There's this little bump from the chain, and then here's the first stitch. Actually, I guess that's not a single crochet, that's the slip stitch, but it's the first visible stitch we can see. So I'm going to work the stitch before that one with a single crochet, and then for row 13 I'm chaining and turning. Again, I'm going to skip the first stitch and slip stitch into the second stitch. Now we've made it almost all the way back around the heel to where we started the beginning of this short row, and instead of turning around here, we're actually going to work all the way around the slipper toward the front. So you can see I've put 2 stitch markers here, and they're about 1/3 of a way back. For reference, this is about 1/3, and it's okay for us to remove the original stitch markers now. And we're going to continue around in this row, and this part is a little weird to navigate, so we're just going to do our best to create a single crochet opportunity in some of these holes that are left from the short rows. So I'm just kind of working where I can see that I can put a stitch, and just trying to keep them about the same density that the rest of the stitches are. So I don't want to skip a big area and have my stitch really stretched, spanning a big spot, but I also don't need to clump them together and add too many stitches in that section. And now that we've smoothed out these stairs, we're going to continue with round 13. Notice I'm calling it round instead of row because we started over here, and we're actually going to work all the way around the slipper this time in order to create one nice clean line and smooth out these little staircases, as we're calling them. So round 13 is continuing around in the same direction until you get to the back of the heel where you originally started the slipper. And now we've made it back to the heel where we originally attached the yarn, and so that completes round 13, and we're going to begin row 14, and it's called a row because we're just going to work to this stitch marker and then turn back around. And again, what we're doing here is stacking a section up that will eventually fold over, and it will form the little tube to put the laces in. So we're going to work in single crochet all the way until we get to that marked stitch. This time we're actually just going to go all the way to the marked stitch, and we're going to do a single crochet in that same stitch that the marker's in. So that's where row 14 is going to stop, and we're going to turn this around and chain 1 for the beginning of row 15, where we're going to single crochet in every stitch all the way around to this marker, and then work the marked stitch here, just the same as we did over here. So I'm going to single crochet in the first stitch, just like regular old single crocheting, no short rows, and then I'm going to single crochet in every stitch around to the other marker. Okay, so now we're wrapping up row 15, and I'm going to work my last single crochet in the marked stitch, and then I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to chain 1 for the beginning of row 16, and we're going to continue like this for 4 more rows. So 16 through 19, you're going to go back and forth, back and forth. So 4 more total rows like that, and you should be ending up in this same spot, which is, for me, if this is the back of the flip-flop, then this is the right side of the shoe. So we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. And that will be row 19 that we're ending right there. And now that I've worked 4 more rows back and forth, for a total of, we're on row 19 here. Row 20 is going to be the same single crochet. We're just going to stop back here at the heel where we originally attached the yarn. Alright, now that we're back where we started, a long time ago right here, we should have the same number of rows on this side and on this side, making this even on the sides and the back. So I'm going to cut my yarn, pull it through to finish it off, and then I'm going to just weave it in a bit here, and then we're going to fold this part over. So you don't have to work too hard at that, because you can just tuck the rest of the tail into this tube that we're going to make. Now that we have that basically woven in, we are going to fold this edge over in order to make the tube for the laces. And the laces I'm using are just suede leather laces, and you need about 2 yards total, 1 yard for each slipper. So I've threaded my tapestry needle with the same color of yarn, and I've attached the yarn right here in the inside in order to tuck this first corner over. And I have the yard of suede running through so that we're just going to sort of sew it into this tube. And I'm going to fold the edge over as I go. We're kind of looking for somewhere around like 3 to 4 rows to be out on this part here. So it'll look something like that. And I'm going to do a whip stitch in order to fasten this down. So I'm just going right over the edge and pulling it through, and then back here and pulling it through again. I'm just going to continue like that all the way around this edge, trying to keep this tube piece looking as even as possible as I go around, so that it creates a nice even edge. Alright, we've made it all the way around to the other side, so I'm going to just do my last stitch here, and then I'm going to just tie the yarn off. Even if you don't like to usually put knots in your crocheting, this might be a good place to break the rule, because just the pressure that your foot is going to put on this shoe, you want to just make sure it's as sturdy as possible. So I'm tying a few knots, and these are going to be disguised by your foot. No one will ever see them.